3-eye atlas switched its orbit a couple of days ago. I think it's 2 days ago. Astronomers were able to detect that it switched its orbit. Now the question is, let's get right down into it. Is this artificial, or is this just some kind of big rock in space? It has all the signs of being an engineered artificial spaceship.
What's interesting is that you've been, throughout your life, highly connected to the Pleiadian civilization. I'm curious to know if you've, at any sense, felt that they could be them.
I feel, not know in any way, that it could be a Pleiadian ship. I feel that way because we're at a crisis point right now where we're on the verge of making a critical leap to a much higher level of consciousness, as far as I can tell. Well, how can I tell that?
Barbara Hand Clow, welcome back on Just Tap In. I wanted to start off asking, as always, what are you most excited about right now globally and in your life?
I'm the most excited about observing the awakening of the second dimension, which has been happening very, very forcibly all this year with volcanoes and earthquakes and various tectonic events on the planet. And I'm finding it a very, very exciting experience to be alive at a time like this, because I can see how deeply affected we are by the Earth. And by being able to understand that, I call it the tectonic awakening, basically, to be able to understand it scientifically and also emotionally, I think is something that could benefit every single person who's going to be observing our talk together, because you can't make it stop and you can't make it go away. And really, you can't fly to Mars because Mars might be having it too. The facts are, this is the Earth expressing herself, and we are really at a divine moment in time right now. And I find that very, very exciting and also very difficult.
I remember in our first conversation, actually, almost about a year ago, you told me that these ancients would know that there are larger cycles on the planet, 1,000-year, 26,000-year cycles. And a lot of them have been marked by these physical cataclysms like floods or other natural events. But however, this one that we're coming up against is actually an emotional cataclysm. And I'm curious to just dive really deep into that with you, of what it means to be going through an emotional cataclysm at this time, because times are feeling so heavy for so many of us right now. What does that really mean?
Well, I find your comment, you ran into somebody who said that a year ago, because I started saying 20 or 30 years ago that this particular cycle was going to be extremely difficult because it would be emotional and not so geophysical. Now, considering what's been going on the last year, that would also suggest that possibly it's going to be very geophysical as well as emotional. In other words, the degree of the emotional processing would be much more intense than I imagine. But it's also possible that we're going to have what we've been having the last year, which is a series of creative movements on the part of the Earth that have not really been all that destructive in comparison to the cataclysms of the past. And in my case, I've specialized in writing and speaking about the last 100,000 years of the cataclysms, particularly the last 20,000 years. And so for me to say that I believe it's possible that we may have something like we've had during 2025, and that it won't actually be a global cataclysmic type event, is to be taken seriously because I probably have a pretty good intuitive pickup on that. And so even though I've been watching and enjoying, the amazing thing about being alive right now is so many great young scientists in particular are telling the true story of Earth, and we've gotten beyond all the lies that occurred when I was a child and during my education. And so during the last year, by observing events all over the planet, I have gained like a PhD in geophysics. And anybody can do that because the people who are doing it for us, the one that I admire the most is Stefan Burns, because he covers astrology and emotional issues and higher consciousness issues, as well as fantastically brilliant science. The brain that Stefan has is, it's unbelievable. And so he is able to, it's almost like he's like a translator. He's able to take this really complex information that's been piling up for the last 20 or 30 years because the public has had very little access to it. And it's like we're just getting this incredible education about how the earth really works.
Mm. And there's almost also an esoteric understanding with all of this, because you said that where your research around the alchemy of the 9 dimensions intersects with this planetary ascension process, it's actually where our planet is expanding to accommodate our need to access other dimensions. So where does all these earth changes and the quakes and the volcanoes and all these things intersect with? There are dimensions that are opening up to us that we hadn't been aware of before, consciously.
Yeah. Well, first I'll start out with science, and then I'll go to what I discovered myself, because I'm still integrating it right now, because I brought in the alchemy of 9-dimensional model in 1995, and I've been fine-tuning it ever since. And so it's not science, although I love science. But scientifically speaking, we have reached really an awesome moment in time as you and I are having a chance to be together. This is the spring equinox 2025. The amazing thing about what's going on right now is, scientifically speaking, if you were a student in geophysics or in geology or something like that, if you talked about crustal shifting, it would have been as much of a taboo as it has been for historians and archaeologists to talk about Atlantis. So crustal shifting was the big taboo, and then Atlantis is the other big taboo. And all of a sudden, they're both falling flat on their face, because what's happening as we speak, literally just in the last month, conventional geologists are all switching very fast over to realizing that we are in the middle of a crustal shifting phase on this planet. And they mainly talk it in terms of the Pacific Ring of Fire, that the Pacific Ring of Fire is moving. And then they give different interpretations of how it's working, like off of Russia on Kamchatka Peninsula, or off of California, or off of Oregon, or whatever. They're talking about various places where the crust is subducting below the crust above, and different things like that. But pretty much universally, people are just starting to be honest about it. The planet is in movement right now. Now, when this has happened before, it has been tremendously cataclysmic. We know that during especially the last 20,000 years. Not necessarily going to be the same thing today. I think what we need to do is enjoy our opportunity to study how the whole thing works, and how volcanoes are all interconnected. Like about a month ago, as a result of the 8.8 quake off of Kamchatka Peninsula, it was discovered by a group of volcanologists who were mainly involved with studying Oregon and Washington and all the volcanoes in that part of our world. And a group of them discovered that when the earthquake happened, and it was a tremendously powerful earthquake, we've barely absorbed the energy from that one. But what they discovered is that all of the mountains in the Cascadia subduction zone, that's the area off of the Oregon, Washington, Northern California coast, and then the volcanoes are in the mountain ranges all along the coast. They discovered that the mountains were breathing in synchronicity to the cosmos as a result of the quake creating energy pulsing through them. Now that is miraculous. I mean, for me, that was just, I just stopped and started meditating. Like, oh my God. And so maybe if we can all meditate and be with the earth and be at peace with our beautiful planet, maybe maybe the tectonic forces can work more easily if they're more in synchronicity with the third dimension. That's one of my hopes.
It just shows, it goes to show that the earth is alive, is conscious, is breathing as well.
Yeah,
and
breathing.
Right before we started, recording on the call, you mentioned to me about this symbolic kite formation that is also happening, not just with the earth, but with the outer planets as well. If you want to enlighten us as to what that metaphor really means to us, and what we're going through flying a kite in this cosmic picture that we're painting right now.
Yeah. And of course, I use geocentric astrology, but you even can see, that means you make a chart that's with the earth as the focus from the point of view of Earth. But we even can see this heliocentrically, which means from the position of where the planets are located in relationship to the sun. And this is where Stefan Burns's work is so important right now, is he's constantly showing us, heliocentric images of where the planets are in the solar system. And of course, when you get to the outer planets, nothing can be on scale because Pluto's so far out and Uranus and Neptune are so far out. But a computer program has been created, a visual one, showing you where these planets are in terms of their angular relationship with each other. So when we talk about a kite, we're talking about an angular formation between planets. So at this point in time, starting this summer, spring, summer, all of the outer planets, and that's Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn, have moved into a kite formation, which is a grand trine between, I know this is always hard to absorb, I'll just have to do it verbally, between Uranus and Pluto. Pluto is in early Aquarius, and Uranus is in early Gemini. And then Saturn is in early, Saturn is in early Aries. And then the interesting thing about where Saturn is located, that's a grand trine. The interesting thing about that is that Saturn is conjunct Neptune. So what we have is we have this grand trine between Uranus and Pluto and Neptune, conjunct Saturn. And then what happens is a kite keeps forming by planets that are in between Uranus and Neptune. That's what's going on with this formation right now. It's going to change, it's going to be going on all the way through 2027. And so it's going to change form to some extent. But what holds it in form is that outer planet grand trine. So at this equinox, when the sun went into Libra, the sun, which was also just, there was a new moon the day before the equinox, so it was really the sun-moon, formed the top of that kite between that grand trine in the outer planets. Now, does that make sense to you?
100%.
To some extent, okay, because
Yes.
then what's wonderful about watching Stefan's program is you can see the heliocentric visual of the way that functions. And then as astrologers, we draw geocentric charts with our perspective from the Earth. And then this kite also forms in terms of geocentric perspective as well as heliocentric. And that's also very important, by the way. They're not usually quite so much in tandem. It's almost like we're locked into the power of the solar system itself, more so than usual. And then, as far as I can tell, which we, of course, can talk about it, there are some amazing things going on with the location of our solar system in the galaxy itself. So what this kite formation seems to be doing, because the way astrology affects us as humans is that we respond psychically and emotionally and even physically to the locations and signs of the various planets that affect us. And so this kite formation seems to be bringing down into our earthly consciousness the whole consciousness of the solar system itself. And so I think, first of all, obviously, if that's true, and I know it's true because I'm having to live with it every day and it's driving me absolutely crazy, and probably most people who are listening. But what that's doing is that's expanding us. Then it's clear that the Earth is expanding, because the reason crustal shifting occurs is when the crust of the Earth is not large enough and strong enough to handle the internal forces. Now, where are those internal forces coming from for our planet? They're coming from the cosmos, they're coming from the solar system and the heliosphere, and they're coming from the perfect geometry of that kite. And so it seems to just be focalizing everything to such an intense degree that it's almost intolerable. I'm finding. And that's because, according to my model, as we open up more and ground more in the third dimension, and the more we activate the second dimension, which is the tectonic realm, and the more we connect with the core of the planet, that's the first dimension. And by the way, Emilio, the core of our planet right now is very much in communication with 3I Atlas. If we read our astronomy correctly, and if we read the dimensional model correctly, our core is vibrating with the information and intentions and activities of this visitor that is coming into our solar system. So where the tension comes for us as humans is all of that energy. Think of those first three dimensions like a triangle. And in my own books, I use it as a triangle with like a pyramid with a person lying on the top of the triangle. And I think in terms of the person, us as individuals, being activated by that triangular force and very affected by that kite. And so then what happens is it just explodes the power of the fourth dimensional polarity and duality. And we're living on a planet right now where we are influenced tremendously by the fourth dimension, because right now we're starting to purify the fourth dimension. We're starting to take it to a higher level of a greater understanding of dark and light, not fighting with everybody, not arguing with anybody who disagrees with us, but simply absorbing both points of view of all of the things that are happening on the planet so that we can finally move ourselves to unity.
I'd love to stay on 3I Atlas for a moment. I believe it was named by Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb. It's been all over mainstream news, which is incredible to see, because 3I, meaning it's the third interstellar object of such magnitude that has entered our solar system. Many people are believing it's a grand mothership, spaceship that is coming to invade us, and all of the fear going on. You have such a different take on it. And I'd love to just give a really simplified overview of when you first came across what that was, tuned into the energy, and what did you conclude from that?
It took the name Atlas because the name of the laboratory, the initials for the laboratory where they first cited it were ATLAS, and I can't tell you what that meant. But that particular laboratory, and I think it's in Chile, that particular laboratory was really focused on spotting anything that gets into our solar system. So that's the reason that they saw it there first. So what astrologers do, we look for why is something named the way it's named, and then we look for what that might indicate to us. Well, first of all, it's that laboratory. That laboratory is dedicated to spotting anything that might come into our solar system. Well, why do they care? They're spotting stuff, trying to figure out how to shoot stuff out of the sky that they think are dangerous to us. And so when this whole thing started, the first thing I started watching out for was whether that was part of the agenda. And as far as I can tell, there's a lot of resources going toward watching this whole thing and even considering taking action against it. In my opinion, that would be the stupidest thing that anybody could ever do, because they have no idea of the consequences of taking an action like that in the solar system itself. But since they're so willing to geoengineer anything that they can figure they can fool with, I don't trust them. And I would say that I'm putting a lot of intention, and I think people of higher consciousness should put a lot of intention now into not fearing anything and not going into looking at this from the point of view of danger. Because first of all, as far as I can tell, if there is something dangerous about it, there's nothing that you and I can do. And I don't really think there's anything any of these laboratories can do either. So once I got that far, I just went to a different place probably than most people go, which is, okay, what about Atlas? Well, Atlas is one of the kings of the ancient Atlantis. He's one of the kings on the Atlantean island, the third phase of it. So I thought, well, one thing I can figure, we're going to get some revelations about Atlantis, because Atlantis obviously was an advanced civilization on our planet. It obviously went through 3 phases and maybe more, and we could talk about that until we were blue in the face. But the point is, the reason Atlantis is important to us is for us to never forget that we once were very advanced. We have degenerated in terms of our culture and intelligence on this planet in relationship to what the Atlanteans had developed. Well, how do I know that? Well, this is where it gets. This year is truly remarkable, because in March of this year, maybe it was late February, we got the information about the structures under the Giza plateau from a group of Italian scientists, and very, very credible information. They used ground-penetrating radar called SARS technology in order to look down a couple of miles into the earth under the Giza plateau. And the Giza plateau is where the Great Pyramid is located in Egypt. Well, ground-penetrating radar had already revealed a lot of information about incredible underground structures deep under Romania. And I had already started writing about that. So during this last year, but also the last 20 years, we have been getting information about the second dimension, because the minute you go below the crust of the earth, you're in the second dimension. So at this point, we have received a tremendous amount of information this year about the underground structures under Romania, under Iraq, under Montana, by the way, near Helena, Montana, and under the Giza Plateau. And so right now, we have a greater comprehension of the subtlety and intelligence of that dimension, looking at the creative structures that we found under there. Okay, so let's see, where I lost my train of thought a little bit. Maybe you want to lead it back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because it ties back into Atlas relating to Atlantis, uncovering the second dimension.
That's right. That's right.
You called the 3-Eye Atlas a harbinger of Earth's awakening. And how far out is it until it comes? Because I know it will go close to the sun, but will it come close to the Earth? And if so, what do you feel will
Yeah,
be
I'm
the
trying to
outcome
think.
of that.
I think the closest path to the Earth is, let's see, I've got a few notes here. It comes close to Mars in early August, by the way, August 3rd. And given all the stuff that's going on with Mars, that's a big deal. It's a very big
2026.
deal. Like August 3rd, it gets
2026.
2025.
So it already went past
No, did I say August? I meant, let's see, October. Sorry,
October.
October
Coming
3rd.
up.
We're in September, and that's October. Okay, then it comes close to Venus in November sometime. And then in terms of the Earth, the closest pass to the Earth is going to be December 19th. And the whole way this thing is working, I don't want to nail it down too close, because 3I Atlas switched its orbit a couple of days ago. I think it's 2 days ago. Astronomers were able to detect that it switched its orbit. Now the question is, let's get right down into it. Is this artificial, or is this just some kind of big rock in space? It has all the signs of being an engineered artificial spaceship. I don't think you can get away from that. And it's like a lot of people don't want to talk about that, because then they think you should shoot it out of the sky. Well, there's no reason to think you should shoot it out of the sky. It's some kind of messenger, it's some kind of visitor that's going to affect us. And we should all be tuned into it and watching the various stages of it as it comes in.
Because what's interesting is that you've been throughout your life highly connected to the Pleiadian civilization, and writing the Pleiadian agenda, going through many past life regressions to understand that information. I'm curious to know if you've at any sense felt that they could be them in that ship, in that object that we're seeing in the sky.
I feel, not know in any way, that it could be a Pleiadian ship. And I feel that way because we're at a crisis point right now where we're on the verge of making a critical leap to a much higher level of consciousness, as far as I can tell. Well, how can I tell that? That's where astrology comes in. That's where we watch. And I don't have a powerful enough computer to find, to go way back and find another time when there was a kite with the outer planets. There have been kites with the inner planets, and because it happens a lot more often. But I strongly suspect, just intuitively, we may not have had a kite with the outer planets influencing us for probably 25,000 years, 26,000 years. I strongly suspect this is a precessional issue, because right now we're precessing we're in the early stages of the age of Aquarius. And the person who does a good job on looking at what's happening right now in relationship to 26,000 year cycles. Now, in my universe, as a Pleiadian teacher, we have completed 4 precessional cycles. We've completed a 100,000 year cycle at this point. And this, by the way, relates to cycles in the Mayan calendar. I'm not just making this up. The 100,000 year cycle in the Mayan calendar is a very powerful cycle that involves the gift of Neanderthal intelligence on this planet, and then the development of Homo sapiens on this planet. This 100,000 year cycle, if we just look at it just scientifically, from an evolutionary point of view, is a very, very big deal. And so I've been looking at it from that point of view. And so fortunately, we have another person, another scholar, who's looking at things through these long cycles of time very intelligently. And this is Bibhodev Misra. He's the author of the, let's see, I've got it right here, the Yuga Shift. And he's a Vedic scholar, and Vedic timelines are known to be some of the most accurate and long-term on this planet, along with the Mayan. The Mayan cycles are also very ancient and very, very reliable. And Bibo Dev Misra is saying that we're now out of the Kali Yuga as of March 2026. And this really caught my eye because March 2025, March of this year. I'm already thinking of 2026 because we're going to get a big revelation about all of this in February of 2026. It's only coming in only a few months. And I think that this visitor in our solar system, 3i Atlas, I think is exhibiting a great deal of information about some of the things that Bibu Dev Misra was saying. And so right away in March of 2025, this year, everything started exploding in our solar system in terms of the different things that are happening, particularly on the Earth. You see what a big, it's so hard to pull the whole thing all together that sometimes all you can do is just meditate and use your insight. But the fact that Bibu Dev Misra's interpretation from the Vedas of the cycle that we're in right now is so close to the Pleiadian interpretation, which I take credit for because I came up with it. I think that looking at what Bibu has to say is a big part of what we're trying to figure out right now. And I haven't heard much lately. We heard a lot this last year. His book is wonderful. Let's get the name on it. The Yuga Shift.
Yuga Shift.
Yuga Shift is definitely a book to read. Yeah, and his information is very much in synchronicity with the Pleiadian information.
Yeah, and thankfully we have people like you that are weaving together not just what you've received, but also what other people have found, because it is a grand puzzle, and we are each nodes in the cosmic consciousness that are putting this story together, and it's a big story. And another thing, astrologically speaking, is you mentioned the outer planets. I know that in your conversations with our friend Heather Ensworth, she's mentioning how Saturn Neptune conjunct in Aries brings about historically spiritual renaissance, and we're approaching that like a bigger and wider spiritual renaissance than ever. And maybe this can even be related to what we're gonna be revealed in, or what will be revealed to us in the next coming months.
And the exact Saturn Neptune conjunction is in February of 2026. And so that's when I really sense we're going to have a lot more clear understanding about just exactly what's going on here with this kite formation. Because this kite formation just seems to be just yanking us into higher consciousness, and we don't have our feet on the ground,
You also brought up that in your last post about the equinox, that there's a lack of normal coherence between realities that makes many of us feel afraid and even possibly invaded. That's why I think some people are in fear of this 3i Atlas, because it's like, are we going to get invaded? Like, this thing looks huge. I don't know what it is. But what do you think it is about this lack of coherence between realities that if we can balance that, the fear will dissolve and we'll just be open to whatever possibilities it might bring for us?
Well, fortunately, I wrote about this issue extensively in Catastrophobia, which came out in 2001. The publisher changed the title of Catastrophobia, which means fear of cataclysms and fear of catastrophes, changed it to Awakening the Planetary Mind, which I didn't like and I still don't like, because Catastrophobia was published. This is so interesting. Okay. Catastrophobia was published in September 2001. The book came out. The Catastrophobia is based on the idea that we are a multi-traumatized, what I want to call it, individual or group of people, species. We are a multi-traumatized species due to a series of cataclysms that occurred between about 15 and 11,000 to 9,000 BC that caused us to have like a traumatic complex and fear of the skies and fear of cataclysms. So you're absolutely right. When something like what is going on right now in our solar system, which is the arrival, this is now the third interstellar object or body that has come into our solar system. And people are wired to fear cataclysms because of this cataclysmic cycle. And so a lot of what this year is about is overcoming the fear of cataclysms. And so one of the reasons I like to work with 100,000 years of time is because we weren't always a multi-traumatized species. And so to go back to the point we were a little while ago, regarding the discoveries under the Giza Plateau and under Romania and under, different places on the planet, we had a very advanced civilization on this planet. Let's give it some timing. It looks like the high point was 50,000 years ago. As far as I can tell from everything that I can ascertain, we had a couple of cycles. Now, this is this 100,000 year cycle, this Pleiadian cycle, and it reached an apex around 50,000 BC, or 50,000 years ago. It's pretty much synonymous. And so what has been discovered this year, archaeologically, is we have now discovered some of the remnants of this previously advanced civilization. And as far as I can tell, it was an advanced civilization on the Earth for 50 to 75,000 years ago. Sometimes I think even a little bit longer. There was an explosion of a very cataclysmic super volcano about 25,000 years ago that kind of interrupted us. It's very complicated, and a lot of the information is being uncovered right now. But as far as I can tell, we were quite advanced on this planet 50,000 to say 20,000 years ago. And then we started another cycle of cataclysms, and that were basically the most intense part of it was really about 15,000 BC to about 9,500 BC, which I covered. Okay, so that's the subject matter of Catastrophobia, which then became Awakening the Planetary Mind. And the reason I don't like that title that they gave to it is because the whole book is all about how we got shut down. And now we're awakening the planetary mind. But it seems crazy to name a book, title a book, a title, you just sort of get what I mean. And everybody tells me the same thing. Everybody likes calling it Catastrophobia because Catastrophobia, simply put, means fear of cataclysms. So we have a built-in intense fear of cataclysms coming from our experience, starting, maybe 11,000 years ago to 15,000 years ago. And so I have been afraid that people would interpret 3-Eye Atlas as something to fear. Certainly we can count on the scientific community to do it, but the people, as far as I can tell, and I go out, talk to people and stuff, as far as I can tell, a lot of people aren't paying much attention to that aspect of it. In fact, it looks to me like maybe the scientists are trying to drum up some fear. So I watch out very carefully for how each one of the scientists, how they talk about what's going on right now. because, you know, we're kind of in, it's almost like they want to rerun a movie of fear, and we don't want to fear anymore. We want to go to a higher level now. And so I would advise everybody who's watching what's going on with 3i Atlas, as well as a whole bunch of comets. There's all kinds of stuff going on in our solar system right now. And to choose to sit around and be fearful and freak out when we're in the middle of this just incredible awakening of consciousness and scientific understanding of our solar system, you know?
I was just rewatching Interstellar the other day, and you know, I'm not gonna give away the plot, but there's a point where Cooper, the main character played by Matthew McConaughey, he's viewing his past through the lens of a higher dimension. And do you also feel that we're starting to see these things now because we're opening up our perception of other dimensions, and that is the reason why we can see, you know, these different layers of reality that are coming up? And if so, what does that mean for us going forward?
Well, the ironic thing about that is if you don't want to see something, don't keep inventing more sophisticated telescopes, because the telescopes are starting to tell us the truth. And we're starting to see it's possible these interstellar objects have come through 40, 50, 60, 100, 200 years ago. We don't know because we had no way of detecting them. And so it's kind of a knee-jerk scientific response to feel like you should fear something just because you're seeing it for the first time. You get my drift?
Yeah.
And people, you know, most people are getting pretty sophisticated. It's really kind of fun for me to be alive right now because there's so many people who are going, forget that idea. That is just stupid. People are getting better and better all the time at just rejecting hogwash and focusing on what might really be true.
Yeah. You talked about the true story of Earth, and I'd love to take you back to that moment when you were writing the Pleiadian agenda and you were going through many, many sessions in past life regression to put together and weave together that information that in many senses was lost for us in recorded history. What did you find about the true story of our origins, of humanity, of the Earth, that you feel right now makes sense to weave into this conversation about what we've been talking about?
Yeah, that's an amalgam of a couple of books, because as soon as the Pleiadian agenda came in, then I wrote Alchemy 5-6 years later, whatever it was, in order to analyze the book scientifically, because the Pleiadian agenda is a channeled book. And I think whenever any one of us receives channeled information, we immediately should go right to work to verify it and take responsibility for it and to check the truth of it. So Alchemy of 9 Dimensions is a scientific exploration of a channeled book. So if we go back to the Pleiadian agenda, I didn't change a word in it. I cleaned it up because it get the or when people are channeling, you got to clean it up. But about 80% of the information that came through me in the Pleiadian agenda was in conflict with the current science. And so I went through a process once the book was published and once Alchemy came out. I just kept continuing to observe how the information field was shifting. Like at this point, basically everything that came through in the Pleiadian agenda has been verified piece by piece, including some people are doing some important work now on the photon band issue, which I've had to let go of a lot of things that I brought in because I can only research, so much material. I've had to go along like that. But I think channeled material is is almost like a guidepost, but I think it needs to be studied and verified and understood. And the third version of Alchemy of Nine Dimensions, which is the latest book, the latest version. The third version would appear to me to be perfect. Well, what do I mean by that? I don't mean what I say is perfect, but I feel like I finally researched that material that the Pleiadians brought through me in 1995. I feel like I've researched it thoroughly. And I don't think I have to write anymore, which, by the way, is a blessing. This has been a huge, And so then what we left out is the whole issue of catastrophobia, because the information that I've been bringing in was very, very challenged and deeply tested by means of the false scientific paradigm that we've been living with since about 1700 AD. As soon as a full scientific paradigm came in, then what went on in, say, 1700 AD, 1600 AD, then what happened is all of the psychological complexes and confused mental issues and traumatic mental background in all the scientists affected science. And so we've been recovering from catastrophobia. And this arrival of this magnificent, I know in my heart that this is a teacher coming in. That this is a messenger, and I have absolutely no fear. Why would you fear that? And what I mean by that is, if it's going to come and hit the planet square on center and explode the planet, why are you going to worry about that? That doesn't make any sense at all. We have to learn from it. And I really do think that what we're going through is like a primary breakthrough this year, 2025 and 26, on healing ourselves of catastrophobia, the fear of catastrophes.
Because you said that in December of this year will be the closest trajectory or pathway that this interstellar object will fly closest to us, if it doesn't change correction or change direction again, how do you feel then that the year 2026 will begin energetically after we've experienced that in our consciousness? What do you feel will be the energetic, let's say, vibe of the start of that year?
Yeah, this is why my fall equinox report this year is so important. I asked exactly the same question through August and into September. And what I tried to do in the fall equinox report was to analyze everything that was going on up to that point and trying to find a way to help people just receive and listen. Those of us who are here right now, it would appear that it's almost, you could almost say, like a visitation from Christ, but I don't look at any of it that way. I just feel that this is an amazing experience that's coming to us. And any of us who are alive right now are very fortunate to be able to experience this, and whatever it's going to be. And to go into fear at a time like that, it's like going into a fear just when you're on the verge of a revelation. And the reason, Emilio, that I truly believe and know that what I'm saying is correct is this is what the fall equinox report is all about. It's all about the relationship of the Saturn conjunct Neptune cycle in early Aries with the arrival of 3I Atlas. And so if we look at the timing of the arrival of 3I Atlas into our solar system and the various phases, first of all, we don't know where it's going to go. Somebody just corrected its orbit 2 days ago. And whether it corrected its orbit or whether something else corrected, the facts are it's on a different trajectory at this point. And I think there's every reason to see I believe we will see more course corrections, I think. I mean, I will give you one hypothetical idea right now in a minute about why I think these course corrections are worth watching. But I just want to finish this thought, which it's hard to put it together, but which is to say that I'll just put it simply, because 3I Atlas arrived and is arriving and is moving through our solar system at the nexus point of the Saturn-Neptune conjunctions in early Aries. And the exact conjunction is February 20th. I think it's 14th or 20th. In 2026. Because those two things are happening at the same time, since the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries is the awakening of a new spiritual cycle, and people are just going to have to read the fall equinox report, because I went back 4,000 or 5,000 years to show that every time Saturn and Neptune get close together in Aries or conjunct in Aries, a new spiritual cycle starts. The most recent one being 500 BC with the Buddha and Zoroaster and different spiritual teachers. Because those two are coming together, then what's happening right now, right at this fall and through the winter and through February, is a time of revelation. And people need to just stop and just receive, because the spiritual power that is coming in and affecting our solar system is just awesome. It's, even if somebody built it, in the Orion star system or in the Pleiadian star system or Arcturians, I don't care who built it and all that. Somebody went to a lot of trouble, some kind of consciousness form went to an awful lot of trouble to create this and bring it into our solar system. Mm-hmm. And you got to admit that, that's just the truth, and to fear it and resist it and not open yourself to seeing what a time of revelation this is would really be a shame, wouldn't it?
Yeah. In the beginning of the conversation, you also mentioned the importance or significance of the location of our solar system right now. If you'd like to go a little bit deeper as to why you brought that up.
Yeah, I've always really admired David Wilcox. And so the information that I use to discuss that issue is coming from the Ascension Mysteries. And if people haven't read the Ascension Mysteries by Wilcox, it's about time. And Wilcox has shown us that our solar system is in a very, very special place in our galaxy and in the universe. And this is almost like a birthing center, in a sense, of new forms of consciousness. You could say that. And it's important to realize that, because as this visitor is coming through, this visitor is visiting the Great Temple. And this is why when I think of crazy scientists, mad scientists, thinking about shooting it out of the sky or some idea, fortunately, I don't think they have the capacity yet. I think this had to happen before they actually developed the capacity for that, But when you start to look at the synchronicities here with, there's so many of them, my head's filled with them all the time. This fall is going to be one of the most traumatic and difficult and upsetting and exciting and wonderful and ecstatic and revelatory. It's going to be all of that. And we have the ability emotionally to monitor those different kinds of feelings within ourselves. Got to really admit that we have the ability. This is happening because it's time. And all you need to do is look at what's happening in Giza or the Ukraine or anywhere else where there's a war to register which one do you want?
Mm.
Do you want to be one of those poor people, in Gaza who are being run from pillar to post and attempting to cope with their families?
What is the great temple that you refer to?
The Great Temple. Okay, I have to pull it back because it came from a higher source. All right. The galactic corridor that David Wilcox describes in the Ascension Mysteries, and the location, and that's why people have to just have a copy of this book just to see one page of it, literally. But our solar system is located in a very, very sacred part of the Milky Way galaxy. And that's why we've had so many civilizations that have come here and established temples here, because this place itself, our planet, is the temple. Now, there are other temples. There's a temple on Alcyone that I visit occasionally. There's other planets.
Tell us about that one.
I've written about that a lot. That's what the Pleiadian agenda is all about. Pleiadian agenda is just a simple transmission from the Alcyone temple.
Wow. What is
which
it like?
I feel like, pardon?
What is it like, that temple?
Oh, it's very much like being in a perfect, simple Greek temple, like with just columns and stone pillars and all that. Very oriented toward nature, pure water, pure energy. Trying to think of, in the Greek civilization, they came closer to emulating the kind of architecture and consciousness of that temple. But the Egyptians weren't bad at building temples either.
They were mirroring what the earth means to that civilization, right? Why is this seen as a temple for other civilizations?
The whole planet is a temple. And of course, the people who have understood that the best in recent times have been Native Americans. And so I'm lucky enough to have been born into a Cherokee family. And I was lucky enough to know that from birth. But, the great thing about this moment in time is these are the kind of revelations that everybody is going to be receiving. And to fear, and I've been in cataclysms, earthquakes, and you probably have too, and different things like that. And what happens is the minute you as a person in a body end up in some kind of huge earthquake or explosion or whatever, you just go right out of body and you go into a higher state of consciousness. There's really nothing to fear. And if you're going to spend your whole life fearing death, was it really worth it?
That'll get some people to think.
And I am almost 83, and imagine if I'd lived this whole life being afraid all the time. What good would that have done me or anybody?
Yeah. Another thing that's interesting in that post that you wrote about the equinox was that one thing is for sure. You said that we will be going deeply inward these coming months. What does going deeply inward look like in your personal life, and how could you invite others that are listening in to make that time for inwardness and silence and getting these revelations from our higher self, our internal source?
Well, right now we're living through a difficult experience in the United States because we are in basically some form of collapse, as far as I can tell. It's probably going to be a financial collapse. And I think the most important thing for any one of us is to really, really turn toward the things that we really value, turn toward the people and friendships and love in our lives, and to start to realize that, there's the good old "this too shall pass." We don't know how it's going to work out, but what we do know is it's going to change, it's going to go into another form. And we just have to keep ourselves in a very high state of mind. And I think that's why 3i Atlas is coming in. I think it's going to create a vibrational frequency right in our planet and on our planet, in all the dimensions of our planet, that will make it possible for people to just let go and just go into reverie. Because that's what we have to do at a time like this, because this is very that's why I gave you a full range of emotions that people might be feeling, from absolute total dread and fear all the way to the ultimate consummate ecstasy. But the more, I do believe, the more we understand what's actually happening, the easier it's going to be. And I wish I could give a better rundown on the issue of when, the timing of the different effects of AI Atlas, such as Mars or whatever. But it seems to be changing its orbit. It certainly did 2 days ago. And so it's pretty hard to say it's going to affect this planet or that planet at a certain point in time, I think. But I would advise everybody to keep track of it as best they can. And that's tricky stuff. That's where I recommend Stefan Burns, because he's covering. The problem is that different people who were watching this thing are taking a part of it. And Stefan is one of the people who's like trying to take the whole thing and deal with it as a holistic experience.
Yeah, one thing that maybe we've left out in this conversation around the holistic experience of ascension is our physical bodies themselves. And I'm wondering if you've gathered any insight as to how we might come against these physiological changes that signal, us moving into these higher dimensions, purging out the duality of the fourth dimension. What can even that do to our physical experience and the matter and the body and the DNA that we have in that sense?
And that's where nature is our teacher. And I think this fall in particular, the more people can find ways to just experience, raw nature, whether it's walking outside or swimming or mountain climbing or whatever it is you do, because that's where we have the most soothing experiences with our planet in nature. And so I think the more that people can just, and judging by the way the evening news is being reported these days, who would want to sit around and watch that? At this point, we're being shoved out into nature in a sense, like you got a tan.
I went on a hike this weekend
and get a tan.
It's not a spray tan, guys. Trust me. I promise you.
Yeah, right. I do, Emilio. I think that this is going to go faster and faster. In a way, I think it's already started. Right now, a lot of planets are retrograde, so we're having kind of a really nudgy experience right now. Almost all the outer planets are retrograde, and I think they all will be in another couple of weeks. And so we're having this really strange experience of the outer planets being retrograde and pulling us back. And then the inner planets are going really fast right now. It's really interesting situation this fall. And so I think you got to follow your feelings, because whenever a planet retrogrades, like Neptune, spiritual guidance, it'll pull you back into something that you haven't looked at yet. And it'll get you to pay attention to something that you need to finish. And so I guess in an overall sense, I would say, if ever there was a time on this planet to create as much time as possible to be out in nature, and also to sit quietly in your house or apartment or whatever and just contemplate, just allow yourself to take the time, because this is a time of revelation. You could think of three, but not 3i Atlas. Yeah. Okay. The problem with 3i Atlas is a lot of people have had a tendency to add something else to it, and I have to fight against it all the time. But in terms of this teacher coming into our space, I think it's encouraging us to really take time for ourselves. The world could get pretty chaotic, especially in the United States this fall, but you don't necessarily have to pay that much attention to it,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. I know that these last few months since we last spoke have been full of a lot of energetics and mass events that are affecting the global consciousness. Before we move on to the final segment, is there anything else that has really stood out to you as you've been researching the current events and weaving that with astrology and the understanding of the dimensions that you'd like to cover right now?
Not really, except that there's one thing that got dropped that I think is really important. We had two supernova explosions this year in June.
Mm.
Trying to think of if I could quickly get the name. What do they call them? Let's see. One of them was 462 Loopy supernova, and the other one is no, it doesn't really matter. But normally supernova explosions affect consciousness quite a bit. And I just would like to say that I think people should be watching out for any data we get about that. I'm not getting any data. And yet normally supernovas really affect us. Maybe there's a cover up. I don't know. NASA covers up a lot of stuff. But I think it's very significant that we had two supernova explosions this year in June.
Yeah.
And then it just disappeared. You haven't ever heard a word about it.
I didn't know about it. I didn't know
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. And that's a pretty big deal.
Mm. Barbara, what keeps you believing in humanity during these times?
What did you say?
What keeps you believing in humanity during these times?
Generation by generation, I've already told you this. As I go down from my generation, because I'm almost 83, everybody's more enlightened as I move down. And so therefore, you go down, I haven't hung out with any babies lately, but the change in the level of enlightenment in the humans on the planet is what will carry this agenda forward. And I think you and I had a little private discussion before we started about the issue of whether we're in a cataclysmic cycle now. And, like, say, 10,000 years ago. And I'm not so sure that we are. I think we're going to have a lot of change in our environment, a lot of change in our lives, but I don't think it's going to necessarily be cataclysmic the way it was 10, 15,000 years ago. I think this is more about emotional cataclysms for us.
Full circle to where we started from today. Beautiful way to weave that together. And as you know, we end every episode with a segment called The Final Trio, which are some questions that are personalized to the guests that we ask at the very end, really for integration of what we talked about. Before that, where would you send people to connect with you, with your work, anything that you have going on right now in your space that you'd like to share today?
I'm mainly just doing YouTubes at this point because just at this age, it's sure is a lot easier. So I'll be appearing periodically. There's my website. My website always is handclow2012.com. Always has information about where Jerry and I are going or what we're doing and stuff like that. But I expect to be very meditative this fall. And I would advise everybody to consider doing what they can. Fortunately, it's the right season. I love the fall and the way we get to go more deeply inward all the time.
Why is 2012 such a significant number for you?
Why is it on my website?
Yeah. Why is it so
Why
significant to you?
handclow2012.com. Yeah. I use 2011 and 2012 as the end of the Mayan calendar. I use both. And so I just used 2012 because it was a more major date for a lot of people. In my own research, I actually think the end of the Mayan calendar is October 2011. But it doesn't matter. It's just a 2-year date.
Mm. And that marked, do you think, the start of the new cycle?
I think it started a whole new process of time in our solar system. And I think one of the reasons a lot of people, including me, are having a really hard time is we're adjusting to a whole new time process. And I think that time process is probably going to end up being very fifth dimensional. It's moving in that direction. Right now, it's very fourth dimensional, with people stuck between dark and light and good and evil and all that scrapping around, you know.
I know where we're gonna pick back up on for our next conversation. We teased it.
You know, so much is going on that it almost seems impossible to imagine talking to you in a couple of months and that more will have happened. It's almost like you feel like there can't be more, but at the same time, it's going faster, it's intensifying, and there's going to be a lot more. Look at all the stuff that's coming into the solar system, all the comets. It's not just 3-eye Atlas, you know?
My algorithm on Instagram, I go on and my For You page is all UFO sightings. And now it's even hard because we have AI come in and it's like, what is real? Is this video real? How can I discern if what I'm getting fed in my information field is real? I could be AI generated right now, even though I'm not. But you know, I did there's an app that takes my voice and my video of me talking in English and then puts it into French, Mandarin, Japanese, Spanish. My lips move to the words of the language that I'm setting. It's the wild, wild west out here, but I'm here for it, and we're all here for it. So
I'm having some of those experiences too, I know.
Amazing. For the final trio, Barbara, these questions are personalized to you. This first one is, if you could imagine for a moment that we are sitting around the campfire telling a story with the younger generations, and you could choose one story about humanity that you would like to deliver to the future generations that they could hold really close to their heart, what would you tell them and why?
I'd probably tell them the story of Alice in Wonderland.
Why so?
Because I think that is one of the most multidimensional and subtle stories that we have, or at least it certainly seems appropriate for this fall, where we are going to feel, you know, like if you're going to feel like you expanded and became 4 times as big, then 10 minutes later you're a fifth of your size. You know, that distortion of our sense of our physicality is being really tested right now. And I think Alice is a real teacher about that.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that one because I do remember she goes through like a portal and she's like in another dimension. But I definitely need to rewatch it after this understanding.
I used to be a figure skater. In fact, I was, as a young child, being trained for the Olympics, and then I had an injury when I was 17. And Alice in Wonderland really, for some reason, just was my kind of archetype in a sense of being in the cosmos. And I played Alice I almost dropped the important part. I played Alice in a production of Alice in Wonderland. Okay. And so I just took it in. I was like 7, 8, or 9, you know, I just took it all in the way you do in your heart.
And in a sense, we have to be able to be in that childhood imagination to transverse dimensions, because Alice was a little girl and she was going through these experiences, and I think that's the mentality we have to go into these things with. The second question I have for you is, if you could write a letter to your younger self at the moment she started to fully understand and experience the 9 dimensions, what would you say to her?
I would say that's what happened to me when I was 5.5. And I fell off of a tall tower and was on the ground for 4 or 5 hours. And I had a complete kind of Enochian, multidimensional journey throughout the cosmos. And I would say that I haven't gotten off the boat yet. I'm still going.
Keep rowing.
Sometimes I wonder, I'll tell you. But I'm going to help tell this story. And what's wonderful is the gathering of teachers at this point. You're one of them with me and Heather Ensworth and, Amrit, Sandhu, and different teachers we're gathering together now because we are able to talk on this level and people actually want to listen. It's a miracle.
It might be better than the news sometimes, guys. It might
I
be
think
better.
it's a little more useful.
The last question I have for you today, Barbara, is what do you hope to be most remembered for?
Being a good mother.
I love that. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that.
It's complicated being a mother of 4 children. I mean,
touche. Oh, I'm back. Oops, I disappeared for a moment.
Yeah, right. That was a statement.
I was like, motherhood, I'm out.
Wow. 2 of my children have died. I think you know that.
I did not know that.
My 2 oldest children have died. Yeah, one at age 42 and one at age 29. Yeah, I've written about it. And I'm okay because I've processed it and all that. But I think one of the 2 boys intervened there. They're very much.
My camera shut off.
What was that?
I don't know.
That was probably Tom.
Wow. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you, brother. Barbara, thank you again. Every conversation that we have it's an instant soul connection, and the love that I have for you, the work that you've done for humanity, it goes beyond words. And thank you so much for always just openly wanting to share this wisdom. I know that it's not easy to sometimes share things that are, in a sense, too early for their times, as you did when you were first starting out. But I think this is the precise moment we need this wisdom the most. And thank you for still being around for us and giving us your time. Thank you so much. And
that differential has gotten smaller and smaller, which I'm sure it has for you too. And that makes it easier. Yeah. There's no age to wisdom. There's no age to being curious about the universe. So thank you for many inspiring. Blessings. Yeah. Beautiful. Until next time.